Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namassami. Hello, Dharma friends. Today I've been asked to speak a bit about Buddhism in the era of the coronavirus pandemic. So this is a time when our practice is very important. Of course, Buddhist practice is always important. It's always relevant. But its relevance becomes even more apparent when we're faced with external conditions of uncertainty, of difficulty, of pain, of loss. Then it becomes especially important to reflect upon what the Buddha had to say and how it can be directly applied to our daily experience. So first off, one thing that is really important to keep in mind is that what we're experiencing is not unique. It's not even rare. In fact, it's something which has happened very commonly throughout human history. And it's one of the standard aspects of samsara. So during the Buddha's time, there were plagues, there were famines, there were natural disasters. And for the intervening 2,500 years, there have been plagues, famines, and natural disasters. So this is part of human existence. And also the Buddha told us that every single day we should recollect 5 things. We should recollect that we are of the nature to decay. We're not exempt from decaying. We're of the nature to get sick. We're not exempt from sickness. We're of the nature to die. We're not exempt from dying. Everything that we love will change and be separated from us. And we are experiencing the results of our karma, and we are creating the karma which will cause our future experiences. So this basic list of 5 daily recollections, and one of them is recollecting the inevitability of sickness. Another one is recollecting the inevitability of loss. So these are really important things to keep in mind. So what we're experiencing nowadays, where there's a highly contagious and deadly disease sweeping across the whole planet, it's important to remember that this is not unusual. It's not uncommon. It's not anything to throw our hands up in the air and lament about as being something special, because it's not. It's something to be expected in samsara. So it doesn't come necessarily when we want it to, not that we ever want it to come. It comes as a surprise. But that also is no surprise. Samsara doesn't necessarily play by the rules that we want it to. So samsara has a way of doing whatever it wants to do, in the sense that it manifests karmic results according to its own laws of cause and effect. And those are laws which, for the most part, we don't clearly see the operation of. So we understand the general principles of karma. The Buddha spoke about the general principles of karma in many places. But the specific details of the operation of karma is much harder for us to see. So samsara operates according to these basic principles of cause and effect, of changing conditions, causing changing circumstances, and so on. So what's happening these days, it's just an effect of past causes. It's just a natural unfolding of causes and conditions. And therefore, it's something which should be recognized as being an inevitability of samsaric life, an inevitability of living as an unawakened being in samsara. And also recognizing that the misery, the confusion, the despair that we experience is an inevitable result of our own defilements. So recognizing that sickness is part of life, pandemics are part of the nature of samsara, loss and difficulty and struggle are just part of reality, recognizing this truth, then why do we get so torn up inside? Why do we get so disturbed? Why do we get so anxious? Why do we get so upset? Why do we get so sad? Why do we get so angry? And the answer is quite simple. It's because of our own defilements, our own greed, our own attachment, our own obsession, our own aversion, our own anger, our own hatred, our own delusion, our own confusion, our own misunderstandings. This is why we suffer in times like this. This is why we're so deeply afflicted when these sorts of terrible things happen. So this is why it's really important to come to Buddhist practice, as recognizing that Buddhist practice has all of the antidotes, the vaccines, the remedies that we need to treat the suffering in our own mind. So, of course, if we're sick, we should still go and get medicine and so on. That's just practical. But more importantly is looking at the self-afflicted illness in our own minds and hearts. Looking at the self-inflicted illnesses that we experience, created by our own unwholesome habits of thinking in particular ways, unwholesome habits of reacting emotionally in particular ways, unwholesome habits of distorting our experience, and fundamentally our unwholesome habits of desire, aversion, and delusion. So wanting things to be different than they are, hating the situations that we're in, and clinging tightly to our fundamental delusions of permanence, of stability, of conditional happiness, and of self-existence. So these foundational delusions that keep us trapped in ongoing cycles of unhappiness, ongoing cycles of discomfort, of displeasure, of discontent. So we keep coming back to the foundational principles of Buddhist practice. And Buddhist practice starts with kindness. It starts with developing kindness, practicing kindness. So the Buddha said that we should always be practicing for our own benefit, for the benefit of others, and for the benefit of both. And every decision we make, we should be making decisions that bring benefit to ourselves, to others, and to both. So this is the fundamental principle of all Buddhist practice, is to try to alleviate the suffering of all beings, to alleviate the suffering of both ourselves and others. So we start with practices of kindness, practices of generosity, practices of thoughtfulness, practices of consideration, asking what can we do to help? What can we do to be of benefit to others? So sometimes it's a simple thing like making a donation to a campaign that provides medical supplies. So that's a practical thing we can do. Or we can share on social media about such campaigns. So humanitarian charity efforts trying to alleviate the human suffering that's going on. We can be kind to our family and friends. We can make an effort to check in on them, to ask them how they're doing, to ask what we can do to be of benefit, to ask what we can do to help them out. We can reflect on how we're using our speech. Are we speaking kindly? Are we speaking gently? Are we speaking courteously? How are we using our minds? Are we fixating entirely on our own discontent with sitting on our couch and watching Netflix all day? That's not what I do, by the way. For one thing, I don't have a couch and I don't have Netflix. But I hear that that's what a lot of people are doing these days. Apparently their sales are through the roof, so good for them, I guess. But that's not particularly helpful from a Buddhist standpoint. It's not something that helps ourselves or others or both. But rather asking, how can I use my time for the benefit of others? So helping others is helping ourselves. Helping others brings benefit to ourselves as well. So sincerely asking ourselves, what can I do to be of benefit to others? So for those of us who don't have much in the way of financial resources, so those of us in the monastic communities, instead we find other ways to be of benefit. So either sharing news about how to help, sharing news about charitable operations, offering live streams, Dharma talks and meditation instructions on the live streams, offering counseling to people over the internet. So really making the most out of the media platforms that we have and constantly asking, what can I do to be of benefit to others? So this is the foundation of Buddhist practice. It's the practice of sila, of morality, of virtue, which includes the practices of generosity, of giving, of seeing what we can do in order to give relief to other people. And also applying those same practices of kindness and generosity towards ourselves. So paying attention to ourselves, just as we pay attention to others. What are we feeling? What are we going through? So being willing to listen to yourself, just as we're willing to listen to others. And from that basis of kindness, that basis of generosity, that basis of compassion, then we can practice samadhi. So again, one thing that many of us have is suddenly we find that we have a lot more free time than we used to. At least that's what I hear. Here at the monastery, we're actually doing even more than before. Now that we're live streaming multiple times a day, and as well as keeping our regular schedule, and we're also helping out with charity campaigns and so on. Like I think we're actually doing more now than we were before the pandemic. But many of our friends, suddenly they're out of work, either temporarily, or in some cases people are getting laid off or furloughed, which is basically a polite way of saying getting laid off, or their jobs are being eliminated, or the companies they work for are shutting down. So a lot of people, they're finding themselves with huge amount of time on their hands, which is great conditions for practicing samadhi. So for years and years and years now, I constantly have lay people complaining to me that they don't have enough time to go on long retreats. The excuses are gone. You can go on a self-retreat for as long as you want now. Many people around the world have been on lockdown for weeks. Great conditions for practicing samadhi. Nowhere to go, nothing to do, except to sit quietly and train your mind, to turn your attention inward and cultivate your samadhi power, to cultivate your power to collect and stabilize and focus your mind, to bring the mind to stillness and alertness. So you want jhana? Well, here's your chance. You're on your own little jhana retreat for as long as you want it to be. But that also means being willing to turn off your phone every once in a while. So another characteristic of this pandemic is a lot of people are obsessively checking the news all the time. Well, the truth is that the news today is going to be basically the same as the news yesterday, which is a lot of bad stuff happening. A lot of people getting sick, a lot of people dying, governments mishandling things. Basically the same news that we had for the last several weeks. Nothing much has changed except that the numbers are getting higher and the governments seem to be getting dumber. But still, it's basically the same news that's been going on for weeks now. So do we actually need to obsessively refresh our news feed every few minutes? Maybe not. Maybe not. Maybe we can actually try taking short-term phone fasts, short-term news fasts. Not check the phone, not check your news. Maybe not even turn on your computer. Maybe go totally tech-free for 24 hours. See if we can do that. No news for 24 hours, no tech for 24 hours. What does it feel like? Maybe you'll find it actually feels really nice. Gives you a nice break. And then after those 24 hours, you can catch up on the news, and it'll be the usual thing. The numbers of infections and deaths have gone up a bit. The governments have done stupid things. And, well, that's kind of what we knew was going to happen anyway, so we don't worry about it too much. But there'll also be some good news. The charities have fundraised a bit more money. Case numbers are going down in Italy. There'll be some good news mixed in as well. But we also knew that was going to happen. So we can try that. Take short-term tech fasts, short-term news fasts. Or if 24 hours seems like too long, well, try doing periods of time then. Like maybe you only check the news once a day at a particular time. Maybe twice a day, maybe once in the morning and once in the evening. But setting boundaries for ourselves. Because we don't need to be just obsessively digging into these stories all the time. It doesn't really bring us that much benefit. And we can also take this as an opportunity to deepen our understanding of the Four Noble Truths and the three characteristics. So really deeply considering, what is dukkha? What's our experience of dukkha? What's causing it to arise? And how can we let go of that cause so that we can start to experience a little bit of peace, a little bit of freedom from dukkha? And of course, we get to that through practicing sila, samadhi, and panya. Morality, which means kindness, by the way. Kindness, so practicing kindness. Practicing samadhi, mental stabilization. And cultivating wisdom. So wisdom, meaning the direct recognition that all things are impermanent, unsatisfying, and impersonal. So constantly cultivating that recognition as we go throughout our day. Everything is constantly changing. Everything is insubstantial. That's the way it is. Because the more we develop that reflection, that recognition, the more immune the mind becomes. Not necessarily immune to viruses, but immune to dukkha. So the practice of anicca sanya, the recognition of impermanence, this is a way of immunizing the mind against dukkha, of building up an innate resistance to the dukkha that comes from experiencing samsara. And recognizing that all things are unsatisfying. Everything in samsara is inherently unsatisfying. So there's no point in trying to fool ourselves otherwise. There's no point in trying to expect samsara to be fair, or nice, or gentle, because it isn't. Samsara is a horrific mess. That's just what it is. And if we expect it to be otherwise, then we will suffer. But if we recognize that the nature of samsara is that it's got lots of problems, and one of those problems is every now and then there's an outbreak of some deadly disease, well, then we won't be so bothered. We still build up our compassion. We still do what we can to help others, but we do so with a peaceful mind, an undisturbed mind. And also cultivating the recognition that all things are impersonal. That ultimately what we're experiencing is simply causes and conditions unfolding as they do. It's just samsara displaying one window after another into its nature. So these are a few words that I have for reflections in this time of the coronavirus pandemic, and I hope that these words will help to bring a little more peace and joy into your lives, and a little more clarity into how we can apply the Buddha's words in times like these. Thank you.